I will go right into it. Linguistic landscape and social media.
Okay.
So I was thinking about what to do for today, and I figured that I should probably continue with storytelling as such, very broadly defined, but also to try to combine it with linguistic landscape and maybe introduce the social media component to it so that we can become familiar with what the social media business is all about and how they could facilitate storytelling and or language learning. So this is going to be the topic for today. It is theoretically a bit more on the heavier side than usual, but I think that after the previous couple of meetings, you guys should be able to follow just fine. Okay, so do you remember, those of you who are here for the presentation on history event, that we were making these collections? Yes.
Recording?
It is recording. Oh, I've been recording for a while now.
You missed.
I always start early.
You can see on Facebook if you missed. Oh, okay. You do.
Yeah, sure. You guys were famous, all of you. So last time we were doing building these collections of digital artifacts to represent certain aspects, features of a language in given neighborhoods, right? And we're trying to see what kind of conclusions could be derived collectively from these representations, from these collections, and how we can use that to sort of teach about the language as such, right? And so this is what we were doing last time. But of course, if you think about it, this kind of work has already been done at some point, right? There are already, for the certain neighborhoods that we were talking about, right? They're already defined, most of them geographically by borders. Some of them are already defined by governmental authorities via, certain historical records. Perhaps those records are then used by the press to create representations of these neighborhoods, of these places, of these spaces. There are also, of course, population data that are collected by the government. So all of these things, right, create or constitute the representations of space. Okay? And they, of course, all contain language to greater or lesser extent. Photos that are taken for official purposes, such as these, and this is of course a map with beam point being highlighted, right here. So all these point to a neighborhood as a space that is created by these linguistic artifacts, but also that is already defined sort of from above, right? So we call this we can probably agree that this would be an official representation of a linguistic landscape. Now, of course, if we take it one step further and go back in time to our last week presentation, right, where we, rather than relying on these authentic records that were sort of prepared for us to describe a space, we went virtually into it and looked up the different representations, the different artifacts, the way we saw fit, right? The way we perceive them. Is everyone following? It's pretty straightforward, right? So we most of these representations that we engaged with last time were not created by the government or by the higher authority for the purpose of the representation of that space, but by people. Yeah. I don't know if you have anything to add to it, but if you do, feel free to interrupt me. And usually those are pictures, just like we saw last time, right? And then, of course, if we were to engage our students in this kind of work, then it would be our students' records of that space containing different forms of language, right? Those would be pretty first-hand static representations of what they see, a document of their perception. Now, we talked last week about some of the things that we can do with these observations, with these linguistic perceptions, by talking, discussing some of the pedagogical tasks that our students can perform, right?
That's what I'm looking for.
So that was, so we kind of covered that last week, right? We we had our students look for different linguistic artifacts. They would take pictures of them, they would pin them on the map, and then these would create the perceived space of a linguistic neighborhood, of a linguistic semiotic landscape, right? So some of the things that we all said, that we agreed on, that our students can do with this, is of course, they can decode the words, symbols, other elements, they can translate them, they can also collect and categorize the signs. For instance, we can, see how, take, let's say, all the different signs that are advertisements for restaurants, let's say, right? And then, see how they compare to the advertisements of barber shops. Or we can look at, things like, I don't know, the smoking bans or emergency services, right? And see even how they compare to how these things are labeled in English. And from that we can, derive our own observations, or have students derive their own observations about the language, about the speech act, about the different forms of syntax that are used in these artifacts, and so on and so forth. Yes? Get your finger up.
Oh, yeah. So, sorry. I've got a question about what can you...
Yeah.
Students' first-hand observation. What about students' first-hand observation?
So we were talking about how, rather than having students Google images, how we can have them go into the neighborhood, take their own pictures of the different linguistic symbols and parts of the landscape, and then map them onto a digital map, creating this neighborhood, this artifact. Okay. Another thing, which I always started talking about, is a analysis, right, of the language that is contained within these signs, within these symbols, and how this could be utilized to highlight certain features of the learned target language. Yeah? So we have these two levels, right, of language in space. We have there's the official representation, as it is encountered, sort of given to us, right? And then the other level is how we ourselves perceive it. I would like to hear, and history pen is of course what we did last time.
And then this textual and a multi-modal textual. Text within the context of obviously the pictures and images and the observations. So how is textual and multi-modal applied?
So let's say that you have
decoding words. Yeah, it's textual.
Decoding words would be textual, would be translating them.
Yeah, and symbols.
And symbols would be
multimodal.
Multimodal would be combining different modes of communication. So sometimes you would have an ad that is an image, sometimes it would be just text, sometimes you would have text and image, and sometimes you would have sounds there too.
Textual is specifically
talking about text description. And sometimes you even have people standing outside, being a permanent or semi-permanent feature of these linguistic landscapes, producing sounds, enticing you to go into the store, or to, I don't know, pick up a flyer, or perhaps get engaged in some kind of, campaign, political or otherwise. All these things are components of the surrounding landscape, of the space, and all these things could be used by our students and then by us also to teach a thing or two about the language. And Sonam, you are not here, but this is a collection that I started making with the street paint. And this is our multimodal New York, where that I started, and then different participants in the workshop sort of were adding on to. And you will see that we were focusing here on ethnic supermarkets, ethnic grocery stores. There's some pictures. You have little descriptions of those, and then of course they're mapped here as well. But this is what we engaged in last week. Now, going back to our today's presentation. You'll notice that these two perceived and sort of describe types of space. They're both aesthetic, as in, there isn't a whole lot of active engagement with it, right? Beyond what we can capture of it.
They're both
Static or passive, if you will. We are there as observers, right? We document it, we collect it. We don't necessarily interact with it as such. So that.
I get it, but if I hear one of my challenges to engage with such activities or such approaches that you need to be active, you need to move out from the classroom. You need to move out from the classroom, so you need to arrange a trip out of time schedule.
Or you can do it collectively as a group with your students, or you can have them go out on their own.
As a home, maybe.
I have done it. I didn't go with the students, so I send them in groups of twos, not in a whole group, but groups of twos, and they did this project. I did one semester, and it was really good.
You do it as a group, or you use as a class?
It's a project.
Project.
It's a project. It was the second presentation of the semester, and they had to video it.
And they were videotaping, they were then annotating a map, right? Different points on the map with these videos.
They were annotating the map and using the videos. They were never put in the map. The videos were presented in class. And they were also, aside from taking pictures and putting them in the map, the video was so they would interview people who were Portuguese speakers in those neighborhoods. They were 3 neighborhoods that they could visit. The 3 neighborhoods that are.
Did you ever arrange anything for students to interview people? So they just did their own thing.
They went and they could find some Portuguese, and they all found.
And I asked people which level for this project, for which level?
It was elementary Portuguese, but it was elementary Portuguese for Spanish speakers. So they are much faster learning than a regular elementary Portuguese.
So between this described notion of space and the perceived notion of space, there's this juxtaposition. I mean, the line isn't very clear. I would place these two on the spectrum. My question is, how can we use this difference to our advantage in the classroom? On the one hand, we have a representation of certain spaces that we draw on, that is sort of assigned, such as documents, the textbook perhaps also, pamphlets, things like that. On the other hand, we have our students who go out into the neighborhood, right, and take pictures and document it. How can we use this difference to create classroom activities? No right or wrong answer here. Just
Totally understand, but it's a matter of when, how, but enhance the production side of the students. So in the case this kind of activity helps integration of students in the classroom.
Okay.
They do get time to interact between them, so that really creates the learner as a team in the classroom. So it really helps the interactions between the students and so we got a common topics to share, experience to share from this same landscape.
It seems to me that the question is more practical.
Yes.
It's about activities.
Absolutely.
What type of activities you would design, juxtaposition, just to...
Because there's two different conceptualizations of linguistic landscape, right?
One is the imagined, one is the physical.
Well, I don't know if it's imagined necessarily.
Represented.
It's the way the government or certain institutions look at these others, and the way your students, the ones that are learning the language, look at the same space.
And what kind of, how can we use this to learn, or how can we use this to have our students learn about the language from this realization?
I would use some vocabulary to give them first how to describe the situation, how to present whatever they see in there. I don't know what to call, how to say it. You can use language. See, okay, this is the name of this, and this is the way you say it, and how can you put together to make it have a short of, like sentences, a short paragraph to describe something that you see from the outside.
Okay, so that would be producing your own description versus the description that is produced for you.
So it seems to me that depending on the things that they know already.
Yeah, we would have to be level dependent, right?
And it seems to me that not necessarily give them, I wouldn't give them vocabulary, but I would ask them to explain all the different words that they found in these instances. And I would also do some type of description in terms of if they already know the grammar elements in order to describe, because they have been describing things within the classroom, so that they would make a description of the places that they're visiting. So this is a store, this is a barber shop, this is and people work here, this with the elements of sentences, or they would use different verbs related to that type of work, the name of those spaces and the people that work in those spaces.
Okay.
My case, I think I quite understand you well. So, in terms of how to juxtapose this in-classroom activity, so you've got two interpretation of things. One is the passive, given some information. One is the student themselves when they found out. So in the classroom, I might arrange some activities such as compare and contrast.
Very good. Perfect.
Compare. So like, or I thought, or I understood this is this, and then I found out like comparing and contrast. So I might arrange something like that. That's how I juxtaposing them together.
Very good. Perfect.
Oh, perfect.
Well, I mean, but it's an idea that, of course,
Yeah.
it could be, that's a point of departure for something.
But for me, so the problem is at the first year level, so we only learn in the language of what I teach, we only learn, oh, this is bigger, this is bigger, and this is better. So I found it is quite, in my language, it is quite complicated to say this is bigger than that.
Okay.
So to teach that then. So I say this to the intermediate level. So I might, this such activity might arrange for the intermediate level, of course third year level, but first year as a, let's say Anthony, fade, like a descriptions of eyes with these and that.
I think all you guys are kind of hinting at one facet of the language that doesn't really make its way to a language classroom very often, and that is discourse analysis. And to give you an example, what we could do is, so discourse analysis would be the function of the language as such. What is it accomplishing? So, for example, one activity that we could do at a very basic level even is to select a number of words, right, that would be integral for a particular chapter or topic that we are doing, and see if these words are included in the linguistic landscape that we are looking at, that our students are looking at. And if so, to what end, in what context? What do these words do in the linguistic landscape, as opposed to what do they do in the textbook? And how is this different? What function do they serve?
I think that in that case, and it's something that I've been thinking about, we should know those neighborhoods really good and have that information beforehand, before we send them to do that discourse analysis.
And you don't think that this could be a spontaneous activity with unknown outcomes?
But I would have to, because I'm not going to choose any type of vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to choose
Oh, I see what you mean.
words
That are already there.
that they will find in I would have to think in the way that that word is used in the textbook or has been used in the classroom, and the way it's being used outside.
Well, by textbook, I don't mean just the textbook. It could be pamphlets. It could be other forms of text.
This is a great point, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Why? As we're talking about, to be a passive learner and an active learner. That's what we're talking about here, right?
We'll get into active learning in a second.
So then, for example, here in the classroom, we use a text which is produced by someone else. We use this to teach here. Okay, we learn about something out there in the classroom. And then not necessarily here in New York, my experience, students here in the classroom learn about things or how to engage with people. They learn for semesters after semester. And then some of them might get a chance to go, not here in New York, but go to the country. So they come back, and then that's what we are talking about. They come back, we learn this, this expression, but when I use this, then people had some problem with this. Or people use this, and then I had a problem to kind of understand it. So there is this, gap. Classroom-based experience of learning and immersion. You go into the community.
So, but this I think could be addressed in a way by perhaps not necessarily comparing, contrasting the learned target language that you experience, that you interact with in the classroom versus how it functions in the country where it's spoken. But I think in many cases, this kind of juxtaposition and analysis could be done between the taught language or learned language and English in our case. Many of the discursive features and how different things are approached, how different things are phrased in the area or in the landscape around us, right, will be different from how they are done in the target language and in the respective landscapes of your countries. And I think without necessarily having to go there and resorting to this given, provided, described representation, this is something that we could use as a starting point for an analysis of how this compares to the English-speaking landscape.
Can we do something like this? I agree with that. For the first year or the first semester, you cannot do this advance. But for the second year or something higher than that, Can we do something like hey, assuming that you have friends visiting New York, visiting that neighborhood, you bring them there to buy something. How do you do? How do you put on the language? You have to speak the language. How do you introduce them? How you send out? You have to buy page, you go over here and go over there. Right. All right. So in other words, speaking language and doing real activity.
Those are just great points, yeah. I wanted to take it one step further. So far, it's been, we talked about this kind of passive engagement with the language, either something that is being given to us or static representations of the landscape that we're documenting. I was wondering if it's possible to, make it active, as in to engage with the landscape around us, which of course is no brainer, right? We can do it by touching, we can do it by talking to people, we can do it by interviewing, right? But it has proven kind of difficult to do that with signs, with the actual three-dimensional surrounding, right? So when it comes to the third kind of landscape, the one that is being experienced, one way to do it is to see how it is represented by the people who actually inhabit it. And this could be done through an investigative experience, pedagogically speaking, right? We can have, interviews. We can listen to it. We can critically engage with symbols. We can, see how different people are talking. We can also do walking tours. An example of that would be drifting, and this is something that I can talk about later. But we can also do collaborative mapping and writing activities. An example of that was what we did last week, as well as the week, well, not necessarily the week before, but last week with history thing. There was a lot of collaborative stuff, right? We were pointing things on the map. But we were not really doing anything collaborative that engages us directly, hands-on, with a three-dimensional environment around us. And this is something that I wanted to cover today with Walami. Okay? So, this is not anything that we will be able to do on our computers. So if you have your smartphones with you, I would like you to use them now. Okay?
This is great.
Do you have your smartphone?
Yeah.
Perfect.
This is great. But it's a problem with me. The shared course program.
Yes.
It's a great problem with the Yale students. I love to do this, and it's a shared with the Yale and the Cornell. So how can I arrange this experience trips?
Chris, we do that for you. Not here, not smart. Chris.
Chris would need to be...
Yes. So he's the one who coordinates.
I love it.
Okay, so what I want you to do is to install Walami right here. And this is my cell phone right in front of you. If you all have iPhones, you all have iPhones, okay. So you need to go to the App Store.
Problem is, I don't know.
Do you have your fingerprint?
Yeah.
Okay, that should be sufficient. It's a free app. You don't have to pay for it. And you look up Walami. It should be the very first one.
Research what?
Oh, you search here? Nope. App Store.
Walami.
Oh. Okay. Shut up.
Wallpaper or
Walami. The first one.
this one?
No, the one on the bottom.
Walami. Use existing.
Use existing app already. Oh, you don't remember? That's okay. Jose Antonio, are you closer to installing the app?
The way you search.
It's yep. Okay. You search right here.
Alright, so type in that.
Yeah, just type in while I'm. Yeah, so I'm not going to be able to.
Yeah.
But we can do this together on my phone.
Okay. I'll try to sort this out. I have.
Voila, me. On very top. Oops. First one. And then you're gonna have to log into your install.
Well, done. Easy.
It's downloading.
Yeah.
Open.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys can work together. I would.
Let's down. We can do together.
Okay, Jose Antonio, are you? Oh, you're signing in. Okay. How do you guys install things on your phones without?
So, did you sign in?
Well, I just download.
No. In order to download, you sign in?
Yes.
No, it doesn't say anything. I just look at
He
that.
did.
And I say at the beginning.
Oh, sign in.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, is there any way you can
Not touch
check
ID.
finger?
Yeah, sure. Just touch
Probably
it.
you have
No,
finger, no.
So I have a problem remembering my ID.
So log in what? With my Facebook or
Wait, I know your phone number.
my phone number?
So,
You need what? Yeah.
it's installing. Okay, so it's installing for you. And then verify. Right here. And you should get a text message with the code. And here's the code. 25447. Scroll all the way to the all of them. Get started.
Next.
Okay, and then log in with your phone number. Underneath the Facebook icon.
Choose a nickname.
And
James.
James Lap.
James Bond.
James Bond.
Whatever you want.
James Bond.
Okay.
What should I do here?
What is this?
What should we hit? Return or done or what?
Done.
Move. Done.
And then there's an arrow in the upper right hand corner that you have to press. Just don't worry about pressing the arrow. This will take a picture. Just press the arrow. The arrow in the upper right hand corner.
Which one? Okay.
Hello?
Hello. Hello.
Yes. Choose a nickname. Zay?
I will take your pictures.
That's already taken. It's just something wrong with it. It's either too short or the characters are not right.
You can see
Then, yep, that's it. So this is already taken.
You mean
language specialist.
oh, it's not listed?
I would not use any Portuguese characters.
Or civilization. I don't know, they put the language behind or
Go forward.
whatever, but not that.
Arrow forward.
Not in the
And
front.
let's now do it this now.
One
So,
maybe a flat.
no
I love
notifications
fun. I just pick it up.
and allow location. Okay, perfect. Great. All right, so we have this installed now. Excellent. So,
Stream of what?
wait. Hold on. Blurred pics are close to you. Okay, just click on the screens anywhere. Okay.
Anyway.
Don't do it yet. Let me pull up my phone here.
That's simple.
Okay, good. So you should see something like this. Do you all see something like this? More or less.
Gabi.
Yeah, you all see Gabi up front? Okay. Yeah, Jose Antonio? Okay. Now, what I did here is I included messages for you that are placed in this building, on this floor, on the bottom floor, some of them on the top floor, that label the things that you see with different tasks, asking you to do different things with them. So what I want you to do now is come with me and see how this could be used on an example, okay? And then later on I will, oh man, we have 15 minutes left. I will give you some time to maybe discover more of these, okay? So let's go. Just come with me.
Shall I bring the camera with us?
No, you're working with me. You're working with me here. If you want to look for them, of course, right? So now the question is, okay, how do, so what? So there's this technique, or this app, this tool that we have. What can we do with it?
I can see what use, because I have my program in Rio.
Mm-hmm.
So I would do like a building in Rio, like Casa Hispanica.
Mm-hmm.
You find all different signs that are important to that building.
Mm-hmm.
But while they're in Rio, then they can look for that same type of signs and buildings at the university in Rio. And then to ask them to make an analysis of the language using what is important for the different signs in the US.
So it's like translate?
No.
No.
No, it's more the what how do they interpret
Mm-hmm.
both
Oh, and
types
just
of
and leave the
signs?
notes.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing that this app lets you do is, of course, you can annotate with text. So you can, type your comments. You can draw things with your finger, but you can also paste images. So if you have already pictures of similar signs from, let's say, Casa Hispanica, taken previously on your phone, then you can post a picture from Casa Hispanica next to the picture in Rio. And just, leave it there virtually for people to discover and to interact with. Now, to sort of summarize, I wanted to bring up I want to sort of frame it in more theoretical framework, and to that end, I thought that using Actual's 5 Cs would be probably more salient to sort of illustrate where this whole idea of linguistic landscapes fits in the classroom. Of course, what we do in our class is, communication is something that is obviously, the primary, the very prominent feature or facet of our teaching, right? With the communicative method and focus on oral and written communication. It's something we've covered that is not something that is difficult to represent. For cultures, also pretty straightforward, and there's no shortage of ideas on how to bring culture into the classroom. What everybody seems to be struggling with, and what appears to be sort of the more nebulous part of curriculum is communities. Ackfeld describes it as in terms of communicating and interacting with cultural competence in order to participate in multilingual communities at home and around the world. And I think this is something that linguistic landscape fits very, very well with this kind of idea of interacting with communities in a scaffolded in a pedagogically sound way that could be accomplished through mapping, be it with history, or in a more tangible and more visceral way by leaving or annotating the landscape that is surrounding us using augmented reality. Yeah.
I don't know, the connection and the culture.
So cultures are interacting with, and of course, they all will be intertwined. There's a lot of overlap here. So, like,
I've got a question for you too, for example. So, when we talk about culture, we talk about culture in the target language culture, right? So, for example, if I take a news service, for example, just this, I don't know where the James got this. So, okay, I take a copy and bring this in the classroom, and I say some people may do yoga, so any news, any kind of news, given news. So can I, do you ever use something not from the target culture or language to discuss it, to do a discussion in target language, other than that culture itself?
Your different culture or
Yeah,
culture.
like here. What I meant is immediate environment. Here.
I have.
This nothing.
This would be a learning, for me, trying to do this while I'm being comparing signs in one language and comparing to the other language. I feel comfortable doing that with my intermediate in Rio because they have been using the target language and they're going to be using the target language there. So I think it's a good idea to make the comparisons between their language and the language that they're experiencing 24 hours a day. But here in New York, I haven't done those type of comparisons.
I'm doing something always, most of the time I compare English. How English improved, from French to British and to American. So that the way the language, our language, improved that way. Like in French, we honor, H-O-N-N-E-U-R, that honor in French. And now go to British, and they cut one N, but they keep the U, honor, right? Yeah, they change that way. But you go to the US, they said, why bother you keep the U, you don't say anything with the U. So here, H-O-N-O-R. So it improved, it changing from not only location or whatever, the convenience or whatever, the same thing with our language. Our own language, when we move, we expand, we change. Like when you talk about Portuguese, Portuguese in Portugal is kind of a little different from in Brazil, because you adjust and you do something. That's what I compare.
My point is, for example, now there's a Facebook issue, right? Facebook.
The Facebook, right.
Interview thing.
Right.
So like a third year or second year, have you ever, for example, this is our immediate environment. So have you ever used such topics in the classroom to talk?
I have in German. I did it in the context of, actually I did it with elementary students when we're talking about personality features, character features, and then personal appearance. And I did it in the context of stereotypes. So in other words, I use the target, the American perception of the people, or the stereotypes of the people of the target culture that we were working on.
So my experience, students find they are more active to talk about current affair here, what is happening in the surrounding environment, rather than imagine typical things.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
You are right, yes.
Well, but this is a great
so
way
that's
to.
why we are, as you said, to be active, instead of giving something for them to talk about. They choose their own things.
No, I think an interesting idea would be to try to, connect the current affairs that are being discussed with
then
the community.
That's right. That connection and the culture. Connecting good. We are connecting the immediate, personal environment, but culture.
Well, this connection actually refers to connecting what you learn in class with other facets of life and other disciplines, which is what you're hinting at. Current affairs might be, connecting to sociology, anthropology, politics, right? And it all sort of comes together by the medium, or through the medium of language.
Yeah, talking about the culture, the same. The culture back in Vietnam is completely different from what they live over here. The culture of the Asian American, Vietnamese Americans is different. That changed a lot. Believe it or not, a lot of changes, not only the family, outside, working, because back in Vietnam, women don't go out to work that much. But over here, you have to work. You have to start. And they asked me about how old they get married in Vietnam. So they get married really young, between 18 to 25. That's the age for everybody to get married. After that, it's rare. But now in here, it's different. You finish school, it's already late, right? You're in the mid-20s, maybe you go to master, PhD, you get about 30s, and after that, this is environment. You change your culture, you change things.
I know, is this something that, does this
That's what
answer
you-
your?
that-
Yeah,
what you-
of course, yeah, it does. So my question, why haven't you ever done that? this because of your own choice or you thought about it?
The fact that I use the target language all the time, that I work within the culture, maybe that's the reason.
No, but there are definitely ways to do it, and that brings us to the fourth C, which is comparisons. And this is where you engage in critical comparison between the learned language culture and everything that sort of feeds into it, and then what you have as the first language.
It's different between the app. Children ask us.
Okay, well, we're a little bit behind time. Yep, we already discussed this. That's all I have.